Hey, what's up, everybody? Another surf report as we head into not only winter solstice, but Christmas time. And towards the end of 2019, I'm Chris McCleary with another surf report. This one for December 15th through Christmas Day. And I do plan on having another one, the standard weekly surf report on Christmas Day in the evening. So tune back in next week and we'll have another one out for you to give you the rundown up to New Year's Day. All right, but for now, we are looking at a very complex sort of energies. This is probably the most intense sort of differences that I've seen so far in these surf reports in terms of astrology. And of course, we're going to do the I-Ching reading. But just to give you a quick summary, we do have where we left off from last time. We have more Uranus trines. These are positive. Jupiter and the Sun. There are a couple of squares that we need to talk about, which one of them is Venus. Venus going into Aquarius and what that's going to mean. We have a T-square on the winter solstice. And then we have the Sun going into Capricorn and quite a bit more. Then we hop on over to the Dreambot. The collective unconscious says that we're in receive mode. And that is a direct correlation, not just with the I-Ching influence report, but the I-Ching solution is about receiving. And so I thought that was really cool. That's the first time I've seen that, I think. The Dreambot looking at more of the solution rather than the influence. But the collective unconscious, unfortunately, is seeing us as an enslaved population. And these words in the Dreambot have been stagnant. So the words like slave and slaves and orc have all been in the Dreambot just consistently in the past few days. Then we have the I-Ching reading 33. This is for the influence. And it's called Retiring and Retreat. We have 3 change lines. Ultimately, it's a very high congruency score, but so much happening with the astrology. So the biggest circle of them all is the astrology, of course. And I think the Dreambot does a really good job of encapsulating most of what the astrology is talking about. And so we're left with to accept or resist, as we kind of see the enslavement process, receiving, and then retreating. So acceptance or resisting. All right, that's the kind of the overview of the influence. Let's cover the Dreambot. Here we go. On the Dreambot, I simplified it into 2 memes. I could have easily broken a third one out with words and language, but I elected to do communication with, receiving, and negotiating and exchanging. Okay, so you got words like receive words like taking and gotten, but you have kind of some monetary words, and you also have some language type of words in there. Then you have enslaving, and that's in the orange arrows. So words like slave and slaves, and staying and spinning, like spinning as in spinning webs or spinning machinery and working hard. And that spinning plates is a good one. So it's not just one goal or one job, it's multiple jobs at the same time. We're slaves to the grind. We're slaves to I think there was a word about the system. Yeah. The system itself. Slave to the system. All right. So those are the 2 main ones: receiving / exchanging, negotiating, and also enslavement or the system. All right. Now let's get into the astrology. Man, a lot of the alignments that we talked about in the last surf report, they're still here. And we have some new ones. Mars, Sextile, Saturn is going to start right off the bat. This one is helping you carry out ideals, like pushing forth ideals. And you're going to see some contradiction in here because enslaving is kind of the opposite of pushing forth ideals. And also, Mars trine Neptune is in here, which means if you haven't had an opportunity to manifest your dreams, and I mean quite literally, in this past week or so when we were talking about Mars trine Neptune, manifesting your dreams. So, for example, if you're dreaming about riding across the countryside on a motorcycle, then go get your motorcycle. If you want a motorcycle, go get your motorcycle. That's manifest as an example of manifesting your dreams. You still have that aspect, although it's in the waning process moving forward, and it is kind of opposite to what the I-Ching is talking about in terms of the solution. So hold on towards the end and we'll get the solution to you. The other aspects of note are the Sun trine Uranus. That was starting in the last CIRF report, and that goes exact on Christmas Eve. Sun trine Uranus is the identity changes, and it's not a coincidence that Sun is also at that same time making its way into Capricorn. And so now my identity and ego are much more goal driven. And, that sort of matches with the Mars aspects. Mars carrying out, manifesting your dreams, and also the sextile Saturn, which is like carrying out your ideals, pushing forth your highest values. All right, let's proceed with Wednesday. And Wednesday, we're going to be looking at emotions are all over the place. You've got 2 squares to the Sun conjunct Jupiter. You've got 3 trines on over to these other aspects. So emotions are unexpected. They're all over the place. And they're in, Moon in Virgo. So you might be second guessing yourself, or you might be judging yourself or nitpicking yourself on that day emotionally. So watch out for that. Another of note, continuation from the last CIRF report, is the Mercury squared Neptune. And so rational thought kind of is hard to get by. It creates obstacles. And so if you really do want to use rational thought, don't make assumptions. Assumptions are going to be over in Neptune, and they're going to create obstacles to your rational train of thought and logic. It's not going to be very accurate. But on the other hand, we are in a whole bunch of planets in Earth signs, and so being practical is a great way to do things. Mercury is over in Sagittarius with a deeper sense of wisdom, and so using in terms of thinking and rational mind, as long as you have hard evidence, that's how you're going to be using that Mercury thought, the lower mind. All right. But otherwise, there are other ways, according to human design, to get your authority. So in order to know your authority, you've got to have your own design. You got to know what your design is, or know what your authority is, and then obey it. We already talked about Sun, but Sun trine Uranus, so there's going to be some changes with the ego desires. And this is kind of the end of the pasture, well, the end of the flatland for the ego. There's been riding, just adventuring, just moving along freely about the country, and now we're headed into the mountains with Capricorn. That's going to be before Christmas. Sun is going to go into Capricorn. But it's getting closer to Jupiter. So Sun, ego is getting more optimistic as the days go by. And maybe even despite bad experiences, for example, at least the ego can see the silver lining in just about everything, because that Jupiter is right there. Let's get into Thursday the 19th. By the way, this last chart was, for those of you who are going to see this on December 18th, this is the time of my recording, and this is later at night. So 11 o'clock p.m. on Wednesday night. Now, Thursday, we're going to start looking early in the morning, but we have two exact aspects. The Mars sextile Saturn, pushing forth your ideals, and Mercury square Neptune. We've talked about those. Those are going exact. So the information that I provided, that energy is going to be the strongest on Thursday, the 19th. All right, let's move on to Friday. This is where Venus moves into Aquarius. So you can see that Venus right there is right at it, and it's at basically midnight on, little past midnight on Friday morning. So the very first thing. But notice these squares. So as the moon progresses through Libra, these squares here are converging, and we're going to end up with a T-square on the 21st. Actually, we're on the 20th. Let's look at this. On the 20th, we already have, this is later on at night, 12 hours, almost 24 hours later, you're starting to have this T-square forming, which is going to move into the winter solstice on the 21st. So let's look at these points here. We have the moon in Libra, so harmonious emotions, but it's squared off to the planet of relationships. And so disharmony takes place here. We're in an alignment of misunderstandings. And then Venus is square off to Uranus. And so any changes, this is the homeostasis aspect. We are resisting change, and because we don't want to create more obstacles. And that's the energy of homeostasis is here, and the energy of misunderstanding other people is here. And so all the beauty, it's hard to see the silver lining in things, because Venus also represents beauty and maybe even finance. Maybe there's some obstacles in terms of finance and bills and being able to pay those kinds of things. Maybe you spent too much money on Christmas. Christmas is paying money that you don't have on gifts that nobody wants. Or at least that was one of the phrases I learned recently. So anyway, T-square on Friday evening that extends into the winter solstice. And you can see that here, Venus. Now this one is early in the morning, 6 a.m. on Saturday morning of the winter solstice. Okay, so how do we orchestrate that particular day? Well, it's not a day to ignore your loved ones, but just recognize that there's a high risk for misunderstandings. And there's a high risk for obstacles being created from change. And so stop resisting change and recognize when homeostasis is preventing you from progressing in your relationships. Homeostasis says that family units try to keep everything exactly the same, even in dysfunctional processes that are happening. And so homeostasis is annotated by this square with Uranus. We also have an exact Mercury sesquisquare Uranus, and that's an agitation. So thoughts are being agitated now by change. And you can see that here as Mercury is making a sesquisquare over to Uranus. So there's probably changes happening, as we've been talking about. Ego is one of those changes, and now emotions are changing as well, as if we weren't having already problems with emotions, as we mentioned earlier. But now the thoughts are agitated because of all this. So it's not a real energetically pleasant Saturday for the winter solstice. And if you really think about it, it is kind of very subjective, of course, but the leaves are all down. It's barren. It could be seen as the coldest day, but the shortest day, the shortest sunlight day. So The people who like the sun or the sunlight aren't going to like that winter solstice day. All right. But at the same time, it represents the rebirth as well, or 3 days later. And the sun gradually gets, the sunlight length in the day gets gradually longer from that point on. On Sunday, there is a lot happening. The Mars aspect with Pluto, sextile Pluto, there's an opportunity there. That goes exact. And Venus square Uranus goes exact as well. So those configurations are much stronger. Sun in Capricorn. So now the soul, the ego and the identity of self is going to be establishing goals or the influence of goals, and very optimistic about making those goals, maybe overly optimistic as the sun approaches Jupiter there in the center. And then we also have, I just talked about that, the sun conjunct Jupiter, but that's going exact on the 24th, I believe, or the 27th, sorry. Now, Monday the 23rd, all the aspects are waning except for Sun, trine, Uranus, which is getting stronger. You can see all these dashed lines. That doesn't mean that they are negligent, but they are on the waning side. So they're gradually getting less and less influential. On Tuesday, the Sun goes exact with Uranus. That's exact. So that trine there. And then of course, the moon's making a square over to Neptune. And so all the other aspects are waning that we've talked about. Then we head into Christmas Day on Wednesday. And this is right on right at midnight. You can see that the skies are really starting to clear out. And so later in the day, this is what you're left with. That is a really beautiful chart. You have the sun is conjunct Jupiter. The sun is conjunct the moon, which is a new moon. So here shortly, sometime on the 26th, we're going to see a new moon in Capricorn, and it's all trine over to Uranus. So deep insights. Very positive, optimistic insights. And as you're going to see with the I-Ching report, we're going to be thirsty for these positive insights. Okay, so this is really capping off the week in a really nice way on December 25th. Let's head into the I-Ching reading. And our first I-Ching, as we cast the coins, is the influence. The first hexagram represents the influence, and that's 33. And it's called retiring and retreat. We have heaven over lake. So we have the masculine over water. Basically, the judgment says, retreat, success. Excuse me. In what is small, perseverance furthers. The image is a mountain under heaven. The image of retreat, thus the superior man keeps the inferior man at a distance, not angrily, but with reserve. You're going to start seeing this theme of almost slavery, or the strong man is in control of the superior man in control of the inferior man, but the inferior people now are starting to revolt. Okay, that's like kind of the concept here. The mountain rises up under heaven, but owing to its nature, it finally comes to a stop. Heaven, on the other hand, retreats upward before it into the distance and remains out of reach. This symbolizes the behavior of the superior man toward a climbing inferior. He, which is the superior man, retreats into his own thoughts as the inferior man comes forward. Now we're in revolt. Okay, this is where the slavery from the collective unconscious comes. It's the feeling like we're being trapped on this planet or in your system or at your job or in your family. It's just kind of feeling like it is time to bust out. And so the it's suggesting to the superior man to not hate the inferior man for revolting, basically. All right, there were 3 change lines, which means the solution is a drastically different part of the hexagram, but it really has to do with what we're talking about. It's very interesting. But let's talk about the change lines very briefly. I'll try to summarize these. Line 3, when it is time to retreat, it is both unpleasant and dangerous to be held back, because then one no longer has freedom of action. So it's kind of that restriction feeling. And whenever someone feels like their back is in a corner, what happens when you have the dog in the corner? When it's cornered, it's going to start revolting. And that's where we are. That's the energy of right now. Line 4, in retreating, the superior man is intent on taking his departure willingly and in all friendliness. He easily adjusts his mind to retreat, because in retreating, he does not have to do violence in his convictions. So the superior man is retreating when the inferior man is expanding out. And this doesn't have to be men. It doesn't have to be humans even. It could be situations. When situations are growing out of control, we need to retreat. And that's the sensation that we're having. That's the influence of just either white flag or retreat or surrender, that kind of thing, without giving up. It's the willful acceptance that is at play here. And then line 5, is the business of the superior man to recognize in time that the moment for retreat has come. And so when you see life welling up and all these, I don't know, atrocities or catastrophes or just pressure that's bearing down on you and you're overwhelmed, it's time to just take a deep breath and relax. And acceptance is the answer there. But and that's the natural outcropping of this particular hexagram. Well, when you put those change lines in, here's what you get, the solution. You have mountain over earth, which is stripping and splitting apart. It's hexagram 23. The mountain rests on the earth, the image of splitting apart. Thus, those above can ensure their position only by giving generously to those below. So it's active giving. Wow, this sounds a lot like Christmas. This is crazy. So the act of giving is this solution. But here's what's more. It's much deeper than this. Stripping, splitting apart. Destruction time is over. Test tempered soul. Teach to confront challenges and take the inevitable. Remember, the more tension in your body, the harder the fall is. And the harder your shot will be, the worse that it will hurt. This implies exactly what we're talking about in the other hexagram. Acceptance, lack of resistance, retreating, surrender to the process. And then this one is adding giving, generously giving to those who are below you. This pictures a time when inferior people are pushing forward and are about to crowd out the few remaining strong and superior men. What does that sound like? That sounds like a revolt. It sounds like people are entrapped again. We're right back to the same exact scenario where people are feeling like they're in the corner. And under these circumstances, which are due to the time, it is not favorable for the superior man to undertake anything. Remember, from the last hexagram, we're in retreat. If we're superior, we're in retreat. If we are inferior, you're still in that acceptance phase. All right, one more interpretation of hexagram 23. Like autumn, leaves are stripped away in preparation for the rebirth of spring. When familiar landscapes die away, it can be frightening. However, this is how nature moves towards the next cycle. The time requires patience. Where emptiness can be returned to fullness, some type of overhaul is taking place, so trust the process. The time requires great courage as you wait the situation out without acting until the way becomes clear. The lesson is patience, where breakthrough would have been a time to push through the difficulty with action. Now you must acknowledge that there is little you can do to change events other than let go and open to the inner experience. What a beautiful thing. Let's take this, all that we've learned, and let's give you the nuts and bolts of the solution, or the overall summary. The overall summary includes the astrology, which has positive changes, optimistic changes. I mean, it's not tumultuous. Yes, there is a T-square that could be very tricky, particularly in your relationships. And it could take away your positivity on the winter solstice. We have Venus going into Aquarius, and we really didn't talk too much about that. I don't think I mentioned that. But Venus in Aquarius is collective concern. Aquarius is about collective good, and it's friendly. It's an air sign. Venus doesn't mind being in an Aquarius. Aquarius can be a little aloof, but you're going to be less aloof if you're an Aquarius with Venus in that sign. It's going to be much more loving, much more harmonious, not minding to be out seeing and feeling more beautiful, really. And then you've got the sun going in Capricorn, and we're going to be a little bit more goal-oriented. And if we've got that combined with Venus within the T-square, then that could be tasks overtaking relationships. And so here's the, putting all this together, it feels like we're either forced to choose, either resist the changes or accept. I could go on further, but let's talk about the solution. The solution is observe that the challenges are on the back end. It is ending. It's the end of a year almost. It's the end of another cycle. Even in the moon phase, towards the end of this cycle, as it's waning towards the new moon, destruction, it's the end of that. It's the end of catastrophe if that's in your life. So, ultimately, other than giving freely, giving to those who are less fortunate than you, here's what you can do. Reduce your tension, increase your acceptance. I've got a picture of a dude here with a white flag. It's almost like a surrender. It's not giving up. It's just a willful putting down your arms and stopping the fight momentarily so that you can just accept everything that's happening right now. And particularly accepting when people are giving to you. You need to step back, relax into that, and accept with a warm heart. Learn all the lessons. Reduce your action. Increase patience. And mindfully receive the gifts that the universe has for you. And with that, I hope that everyone has a wonderful Merry Christmas, and I'm hoping to see you on Christmas Day later on, and we'll do another surf report. Get us to the last part of December 2019, last part of 2019. All right, take care. Thank you.